Hi, my name is Kevin Ludlow. I'm 28 years old and I'm from Austin, Texas, and I want to make a few comments about Ron Paul's presidential campaign. I hope my comments can be taken constructively. To begin, I fully support Ron Paul and would like nothing more than to see him as the next president of the United States. And, regardless of the outcome of the primaries, I'll be voting for Ron Paul in 2008. The issue that I'd like to talk about is why it is so important to bring attention to Ron Paul outside of the internet. In November of 2004, many of us stayed up all hours of the night in hopes we would be the first to see President Bush's reign come to a halt. We truly believed his presidency would be finished, that it was just a matter of being patient and waiting for the election results to be tabulated. But if we examine the months leading up to the 2004 election, there was an interesting element that I think is worth looking at. Now, I refuse to call them Kerry supporters, but the opponents of George Bush were positive, and I emphasize the word positive, that Kerry would win the election. And how could he not? How is it possible that George Bush could be re-elected after everything we'd experienced? People thought to themselves, how could Kerry not win the presidential election of 2004? Well, here's a fact to consider. Not only did President Bush win the electoral vote, but unlike the debacle of 2000, he won the popular vote by over 3 million votes. So what does this have to do with helping Dr. Ron Paul win the election of 2008? Well, I think history should always serve us a good purpose. This might sound a bit simplistic, but among many other things, I believe there are two basic prerequisites to becoming president. Number one, the candidate has to have a good message. It's not enough to simply disagree with an opponent. The candidate's message has to be genuine, understood, and accepted. And number two, the candidate has to be recognized by everyone in the country. Love him or leave him, the name has to be recognized by the masses. Think of how Rudy, Romney, Hillary, and Obama have become ubiquitous in this country. Ron Paul does not currently share this same luxury outside of the internet. John Kerry lost in 2004 because the Democrats and fellow supporters were so positive that our country wouldn't tolerate George Bush, they forgot they needed to run someone who actually stood for something. I do not support this war, and I especially do not support this encroachment upon our freedoms, and yet, even I had trouble believing that John Kerry would do anything to help the situation. How then was he supposed to convince people that actually supported the Bush administration? What I'm hinting at is this. Please don't think for a second that Rudy or Hillary don't have great odds at winning this race just because you happen not to like or agree with them. The Democrats made that mistake 4 years ago and we're still paying for it. And please, don't think that you don't have to play a role in this if you want to give Ron Paul a fair chance to win, or at very least a fair chance to play. Comments on YouTube videos are great, but they are not going to win Ron Paul a presidential election. Now, no matter how much you might think Ron Paul is well known, outside of these digital walls, he really is not. Have you ever considered why the crowd cheers at the Republican debates when Rudy and Romney seem excited about the thought of going to war with Iran? Well, it's because the crowd is a collection of right-winged, long-term registered Republicans that happen to share the same belief system, and incidentally, probably do support a war with Iran. Similarly, the news aggregating websites available online tend to be full of young, idealistic individuals yearning for real changes in the world. It's by no coincidence that Ron Paul finds huge popularity among us. But I cannot stress it enough. This is a small piece of the American audience, and it should be not assumed that just because you've heard of Ron Paul that your next-door neighbor has. So, aside from being a cynic, what are some of the things you can do to help Ron Paul get recognized? Well, I think one of the first things to remember is that grassroots campaigns do work. So, to start with, try casually speaking with your family and friends about this presidential candidate. Explain who Ron Paul is, what he stands for, and how he might help our country more effectively than his opponents. Join local meetup groups. Build signs, banners, posters, flyers, mailers, really anything you can attach Ron Paul's name to. For example, use Word or Photoshop to create a document that looks just like this. Print out 250 copies at Kinko's and place them on the windshields of 1,000 cars at your local malls. It will only cost you about $15 and a few hours of time. My friend and I bought a piece of plywood for $11, a bundle of stakes for $3, and 3 cans of spray paint for $1 apiece. These letters now overlook one of the major highways in Austin. It's not much, but it's something. And if everyone contributes something, a lot can be accomplished. So to conclude, I hope people will support Ron Paul by continuing writing blogs, posting videos, spreading emails, and etc. But just remember, metaphorically speaking, there is only so much that preaching at your own church can accomplish. If you really believe in the cause, spend an afternoon outside and help Ron Paul spread his revolution to your town. Thank you.